Pikkie, Greeff, the National Defence Union spokesperson, and Peter Fabricius, foreign policy journalist, joining us now to talk about these latest developments. Welcome to the both of you. Thank you very much for your time. Peter, I'd like to start with you. And we had one of the headlines coming out of yesterday's telephonic discussions were the calls by both presidents, Kagame and Ramaphosa, for a cessation in hostilities. What do you make of that, and is that enough?
You know, I mean, it seems to me that at this stage, certainly from the point of view of our troops, and, you know, Pikkie would know better, that seems to be like the best possible way of addressing this, because it seems our troops are in a really tight spot there. And, you know, facing an enemy that's far better equipped, bravely facing an enemy that seems, but an enemy that is far better equipped, largely because it's being supported by Rwanda, incidentally. So one could talk a little bit about hypocrisy from the Rwandan side, but still, I mean, at the moment, if a ceasefire does seem to be the best practical solution, you know, part of the politics of this dispute are very complicated, and the motives of Rwanda for being in the Congo are highly contested, you know, I mean, debated. And you know, Rwanda claims it's there only to protect the ethnic Tutsis represented by the M23 from being persecuted by Hutus and whatever, and the Congolese authorities. Others say they're there for ulterior motives, you know, to exploit mineral resources and so on. But in any case, you know, there's a negotiation process that's underway, the Rwanda process, and if that is resumed now, it would be a good idea. I
want to bring Pikkie in on the tactical side, but I want to follow up with this question. We've seen Paul Kagame repeatedly distance his country, his government, from providing support to the M23. He's expressed frustration about Rwanda being involved or implicated in the conflict. You think that is, what do you make of that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the UN panel of experts that have been producing reports annually on what's happening in the Eastern DRC for several years now have consistently stated that Rwanda has a heavy presence there. You know, Kagame tries to disguise it by saying he's protecting his borders, and I mean, I suppose he's trying to say that sometimes, you know, the troops cross over the borders. It's as far as one can tell from almost all credible sources, the Rwandan government military is heavily involved in this fight.
All right, Pikkie, let's bring you in. And we heard from the SANDF, well, we're hoping to have an interview with their chief of comms. But their chief of comms, Spiwe Dlamini, last year said that the deployment to the DRC wasn't done in haste, nor was it done without the requisite planning, that the troops, of course, and we know this, go under the SADC and the MONUSCO banner. So from your perspective, though, are they supported well? We've heard some criticisms about not being given the requisite ground and air support. As you analyze the situation and look at the context in which they find themselves, what observations are you making?
If they were properly supported and properly supplied, and they were as prepared as he says they were, then we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now.
What's been missing, Pikkie?
Air support, close air support. We've said that from the very start. You know, the defense spokesman can go on about planning, but you also have planning, and you have bad planning, you have good planning. And if your planning is not good enough, then your mission is not going to, your troops are not going to be good enough on the mission in the terms of being supplied and supported. There's nothing wrong with their capabilities. It is about the support. Close air support cannot, or deployment like this cannot take place without close air support. That is a sure way to fail in a mission, especially given the technology and the advanced weaponry with which these rebels are being supplied from Rwanda. We are nowhere near matching that with what we have in terms of assets on the ground. And that is shown. That is shown in the casualty figure. It is shown in the position that our troops find ourselves in now. And the only way for us out of this now is to negotiate a ceasefire and extract our troops in some way.
I'll come back to the practicalities involved with that in just a moment, Pikkie. But yesterday, Peter, I believe you had spoken to Siphiwe Dlamini from the SANDF about some of the video that emerged, with our soldiers almost in a way trapped or contained in a particular area. But he's denying that our troops there had surrendered one of their bases, and also explaining a white flag that was seen at the base, him saying that it was raised as part of a brief truce agreed upon between our SANDF forces and the M23 force to allow the M23 to collect their dead. Tell us more about that conversation.
Yeah, so basically what he told me is that this was initiated actually from the M23/Rwanda side. The two women and a man, approached the base, I think probably waving a white flag themselves. And then they wanted to, as you said, they wanted a brief truce in order to remove their dead and, I don't know, about injured. And so this flag was raised on the South African side to say, fine, don't shoot at us while we're talking. And and South Africans said to them, fine, you can do that as long as we can transport our people to hospital for treatment. And the two women and the men withdrew to consult their seniors about this and never came back. So the truth kind of lapsed. The truce lapsed. Now, Pikkie, from his context, might know better, but that's what I heard.
Pikkie,
so it wasn't a surrender, is what I was told.
Pikkie, share with us details if you know, but also we understand then that our troops there are unable to leave, unable to seek treatment. And when you say that they should be extracted immediately, and given that we don't know if that order has been issued or practically how it might happen, just share with us what you know on what should be happening in this particular context then.
Well, it's exactly as Peter says. That was just a conversation between the various forces to, have a momentary lapse in the hostilities. It's by no means a surrender. A surrender involves handing over your weapons and being taken into custody, even if it's just confined to base and being under control of the other force or the opposing force. That's not what's happened here. We are still in our base. We are still armed, but we are trapped. There's no way to, when I say extract, I don't mean immediately. There is no way to immediately or quickly extract our members there. The only way forward now is exactly what the Commander-in-Chief has done. I understand from his social media account that he's contacted Kigali and spoken about the possibilities of a ceasefire. And that is a run-up, in my view, of going into talks to cease hostilities and to get some kind of way to remove our troops there. The only questions that arise now is how and when is that going to happen and at what price? Are we going to retain our weapons that are there, like for the infantry fighting vehicles, the artillery and that kind of stuff, in other words, the military equipment, or are we going to leave that behind and suffer that loss as well? I think that's what the talks are about now. It is simply a case of our soldiers are at this stage without ammunition. They are trapped in their bases and they're basically waiting for a solution from the outside.
Pikkie, as you share that, just before we came to our conversation with the pair of you, we spoke to family members. We've got to remember that there are family members who continue to watch programs like ours, conversations like the one that we are having, wondering how it's going to end for their loved ones who are and have been deployed to these regions. So anything that we're saying right now, they would be holding on to in terms of a hopeful and, a proper resolution to this that brings their families and loved ones back home in one piece. So when you talk about those negotiations, Peter, perhaps you can pick up the baton from there around the prospects for a cessation in arms, for the creation of a viable and sustainable truce in this moment, and what should be happening urgently. People have criticized the Defense Minister, Angie Motshekga, for not being front and center.
Yeah, look, it's hard to say how those negotiations would go, and Pikkie described some of the possible terms and conditions, I would imagine, I'd like to think that for Kagame also, it would be probably politically quite a good idea right now not to be seen to be pursuing this to its logical military conclusion, because he's going to be taking quite a lot of flack too. I mean, we are the supplicant here, I guess you'd have to say, because our forces are the ones who are in a very, very, very bad spot, not theirs. They've taken heavy casualties, I'm sure of that, but they're not trapped, as Pikkie just pointed out. Ours are. So, look, I mean, clearly what is needed here is a ceasefire. A ceasefire just means, we'll stand back, our troops will leave or whatever. I would imagine it's possible that Kagame will demand the withdrawal of SANDF as a condition for allowing our troops to leave, and that could get difficult, because that would entail a kind of implicit admission that the entire mission was a failure.
Yeah.
And as far as the minister's concerned, yes, she's been. I mean, the whole department was remarkably silent at the beginning. It took them until Saturday, after 2 or 3 days of fighting, to even acknowledge the deaths that had occurred. And the minister has herself not said anything directly, which I think she should. I think she should go on national TV and explain what's happening and where it's going.
Pikkie, I'd like to give you the opportunity as well to reflect on how well, in as brief as you can, the South African response to this has been.
Well, if you're talking about the response of the Department of Defense and the Commander-in-Chief, President Ramaphosa, I think the response has been respectfully very poor.